I'm Rachel Lynn, 29, freelance audio engineer and oldest granddaughter of May Lynn. The church smelled like white lilies and wet wood. The air hung heavy from the rain that hadn't let up since dawn, and the carpet under my heels was soft and saturated in places. I stood at the far end of the back pew, out of frame from the handheld camera my uncle was using, out of reach from the rows where family had already seated themselves, neatly arranged by surname and significance. Grandma's photo sat on the casket draped in pale pink silk. Her eyes crinkled in that way that made you forgive her too easily. They'd framed it in gold. A real frame. Not the thin plastic kind they'd used for the table photos at her retirement party. She looked happy in that shot. It wasn't one I had seen before. Behind the pulpit? Aunt Lydia leaned in to the microphone and tapped it. It hissed briefly. Then, in that same breathless way she used to say grace over rice bowls, she declared, "Before we begin the ceremony, we'd like to welcome a very special performance from our own family." People murmured. Cousin Ava stepped forward. She wore a long maroon velvet dress with sleeves that floated around her wrists like she was about to float into heaven herself. She smiled. Her teeth were still perfect. There was a subtle sparkle of gloss on her lips. Her voice, soft and honeyed, eased into the opening notes of Wind Beneath My Wings, and the crowd nodded in approval before a note had even finished leaving her throat. I stayed standing, in the hallway behind the chapel doors. I had asked Aunt Lydia earlier if she wanted me to bring the audio levels for the organ and mic down a bit. She shook her head and adjusted her pearl earring. "We're going with Ava's piano backing. It's already taken care of." I waited. "I recorded a piece for Grandma," I said quietly. Something from the tapes she left in her cabinet. The old Mandarin song she always sang. Aunt Lydia smoothed her scarf and glanced toward the open chapel doors. "Oh, that's sweet of you, Rachel. But this is, a family thing. Ava's prepared." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. That part always came easy. They didn't list me on the program. They printed 25 copies, bound in soft gray cardstock with embossed gold lettering, and they didn't write my name once. Not in the acknowledgments. Not even under survived by. They had Ava's solo under the section marked tributes from grandchildren, and beneath it, in a gentle script, "Songbird of the Family." I read it over the shoulder of the woman sitting in front of me. I hadn't taken one for myself. If you've ever stood at the edge of your own family like you were the only one who forgot the password, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. Ava's voice climbed on the final verse, and the crowd began to sniffle on cue. Somewhere in the second row, someone whispered, "She really is the heart of this family," and just like that, everything I'd made the old tapes I'd cleaned up. The lullaby I mixed with the voice memo Grandma left me the month before her stroke turned into dust I couldn't even hold. I didn't expect a spotlight, but I didn't expect silence, either. The song ended. The claps came softly at first, then built with polite murmurs of admiration. A few aunts dabbed their eyes. Uncle Greg nodded in that solemn way that meant he was both proud and ready to leave. Then the playlist kept playing. A low crackle rolled through the speakers. At first, no one noticed. Then a single note clear, distant, haunting like it came from a time and place that didn't belong to the pews or the hymns or even Ava's pretty voice. A child's voice, singing in Mandarin, broken slightly by age, breath, and laughter. It was Grandma. Then came the piano underneath, woven in gently, not overpowering, then the full arrangement. My mix. Heads turned. I didn't move. Ava stared at the sound booth like it had betrayed her. Aunt Lydia looked confused, then quietly horrified. I heard someone in the front whisper, "Is that Is that her? Is that Grandma singing? A few people were already crying. But it wasn't the pretty kind of crying. It was the kind that came with shaking and shoulders curling inward and mouths held shut to stop the sobs from spilling out. The way you cry when you recognize a voice that's gone. When the track faded, there was no applause, just stillness, and the faint hum of the organ still live in the background. Then a voice spoke up, calm, clear, certain. "I believe Rachel made that," said Pastor John. "She told me yesterday. She brought it to honor her grandmother." The entire room turned to find me. And just like that, I wasn't the girl in the back pew anymore. The crowd didn't gasp. They didn't cheer. But they stopped. They looked. And I felt something shift in the air as if every eye had suddenly remembered me. The silence after the track ended stretched so long I could hear someone's bracelet clinking as they adjusted in their seat. Pastor John didn't say anything more. He just stepped back from the microphone and folded his hands like he'd done his part. His eyes passed over the congregation once, then landed briefly on me. He gave a small nod. I didn't smile. I didn't move. Aunt Lydia leaned toward the audio technician and whispered something, her hand covering part of her mouth like she was saying something shameful. Ava was already walking off the pulpit, trying to keep her chin high, but I could see her throat working as she swallowed. Twice. She didn't look at me. For a moment, I almost wished I had stopped the recording. I had dropped it onto the funeral USB last night, labeled simply Grandma, Rachel version, no fanfare, no sabotage, just the truth. They hadn't asked me for anything, but I brought it anyway, and now it was in the air like incense, clinging to everyone's clothes and memories. After the service, people came up to me like I was something they hadn't noticed on the floor. Something they suddenly remembered meant a lot. "That was beautiful," whispered my second cousin Daniel. "She used to hum that song when she chopped vegetables. Gave me chills." "You edited that?" asked Uncle Greg, pretending like he hadn't stood in my blind spot all year. Sounded so professional. Studio quality. Really. My mother quiet during the ceremony, seated between two women I didn't recognize, walked toward me in the reception hall, carrying a half-empty cup of chrysanthemum tea. "You should have told me you were going to do that," she said, eyes scanning the buffet table instead of me. "You caught everyone off guard." "I tried," I said simply. She sipped. "Well, it was nice. You always had a talent with those things." By those things, she meant machines, soundboards, cables, the mess of wires under my bed when I was 15, the audio diaries I kept instead of writing in notebooks. Grandma was the only one who ever sat and listened to one in full. I remember when I played her the first version of the lullaby. I was 23, jobless, back home in the apartment with thin walls and thinner expectations. She sat in my room, wrapped in the crocheted shawl I bought her for $7 at Goodwill, listening through a pair of oversized headphones that swallowed her whole head. When the track ended, she smiled and said, "That's how you hold a person when you're far away." Now that version lived in the church walls, ringing in the corners where Ava's voice couldn't reach. They didn't say much to me at the reception. Aunt Lydia avoided eye contact. Ava sat in a corner with her phone, flanked by two aunts who comforted her with pastries and empty nods. No one scolded me. No one praised me again. It was like they didn't know which direction to push me into. I took a sesame bun and stood by the window. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The graveyard beyond the parking lot gleamed. Stones washed clean. I could just barely see the plot where Grandma would be buried next week. After the monks came to bless the site, she wouldn't have wanted a wake like this. She would have made pork dumplings and forced everyone to play mahjong. She would have made sure no one left hungry or alone. I finished the bun in silence and slipped out before anyone noticed. The voicemail that started the whole thing came at 3:12 a.m. 3 weeks before Grandma died. I was working on a late-night podcast cleanup, something with too much background noise and a producer who didn't know how to EQ a condenser mic. My phone buzzed. A message from her. I remember freezing when I saw her name. She never called that late. I tapped play. "Ah, Lynn," she said softly. Using the name only she still called me. "You still awake?" I had a funny dream. I was a little girl again, standing at the river by my old house. There were frogs and water buffalo, and you were there too. Holding a microphone, you said, "Sing it again, Grandma." And I did. "You remember that song, Ya? I forget the words now. Maybe you don't need them. You'll know what to do." "Okay. Sleep tight." That was it. I played it 10 times that night. Then I pulled out the cassette tapes she gave me on my birthday 2 years prior, labeled Oldies I Like in her shaky handwriting. On one of them, tucked between two opera recordings, was a full version of that song, "Moonlight Over Riverbank." It was scratchy, warped in places. She had recorded it on a handheld cassette mic in the 90s, but it was her voice, strong and strange and full of memory. I spent days cleaning it up, layering piano underneath, rebuilding the silence between phrases, reversing static, pitch correcting just enough to keep her soul intact. It was my secret ritual, my offering, my final duet with her. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew what would happen. If I said I was working on something, they'd either forget or treat it like a child's drawing. They always saw Ava as the star, the voice, the natural gift. I was the girl with headphones and dark circles and potential. But Grandma knew. She always knew. So I made the track. And I brought it. And I watched them hear her again. Really hear her. For maybe the first time. That night after the wake, I sat in my apartment and played it one more time, this time through speakers. Volume low. Lights off. I pictured her sitting across from me in the wooden rocking chair she used to nap in. Her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, her eyes closed, one hand tapping softly on the armrest. I wanted to call someone. Maybe Ava. Maybe just to say I didn't mean to steal the moment. That it wasn't about competition. It was about her. But I didn't pick up the phone. Instead, I opened the old folder I'd buried deep in my drive, labeled Grandma Raw Files. Inside were dozens of clips, her humming in the kitchen, whispering prayers, telling me stories I'd never heard elsewhere. Stories about her mother, about the war, about sneaking onto a train to Shanghai when she was 13. Each file a piece of her I still had. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't Ava's shadow. I wasn't the name missing from the program. I was the keeper of her voice. And they had heard it. 2 days after the wake, I got a text from Ava. "Can we talk?" Just that. No emojis. No punctuation. Just a sentence that made my thumb hover over the keyboard without typing anything back. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before I replied. "Sure." We met at the tea shop on Clement Street, the one Grandma used to take us to when we were little. She liked the rose oolong there and always ordered too many sesame balls. The owner still remembered us, even after all these years. When he saw us walk in, he smiled and pointed to the table by the window. "She used to sit right there," he said, placing 2 chipped porcelain cups down. "Always asked for extra hot water." Ava and I sat in silence while he walked away. The tea steamed gently between us. She looked tired. Her eyeliner was perfect as always, but there was a tightness around her mouth she couldn't hide. "I didn't know you were going to play that," she said finally. I nodded. "I didn't know they were going to block me out." Ava looked down. Her hands were folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. They told me I was the only one performing, said it was already decided. Did you ask? She hesitated. No. I sipped my tea. It was bitter and floral, just like Grandma liked it. I'm not mad that you sang, I said quietly. You've always had the voice. It's not about that. Then what is it about? She asked, looking up finally. Her eyes glistened. It's about how they only ever saw you, and how they treated me like the girl who fiddled with knobs in a dark room. Ava looked away. The afternoon sun streamed through the window and made her earrings glow like amber. I didn't mean to take anything from you, she said. I know. We sat in silence again. Somewhere outside, a car alarm wailed and stopped. Inside, a spoon clinked against ceramic. The room smelled like jasmine and red beans. After a while, Ava leaned forward. I listened to it again, she said. The song you made? Grandma's voice. The way you brought it together. She shook her head slightly. It was like she was standing there. I didn't reply. She used to sing that to me, too. Ava continued, her voice softening. When I had nightmares, she'd hum it until I fell asleep. I looked at her and saw the little girl I used to share a bunk bed with at family reunions. Both of us whispering under covers while Grandma told us stories from the doorway. I'm sorry I didn't say anything at the wake, Ava said. I felt caught. Like if I said your name, they'd think I was ungrateful. You don't owe them anything, I said. Neither do I. She let out a slow breath. What now? She asked. I shrugged. I don't know. I keep making things. You keep singing. Maybe we stop waiting for their permission. Ava smiled. Just slightly. Maybe. We split the sesame balls and drank the rest of the tea in silence. The next week, I went to Grandma's apartment one last time. My mother had the keys. She gave them to me without a word, just placed them on the counter wrapped in a paper napkin. I understood. She didn't want to go back in. I did. The place was smaller than I remembered. Everything had a layer of quiet dust over it. The slippers by the door, the faded calendar still turned to April, a bowl of dried goji berries on the table, next to a prayer card and a bottle of tiger balm. I walked through slowly, touching everything with my eyes. Her bookshelf still held the same titles cookbooks with brittle pages, Buddhist sutras, an old copy of Dream of the Red Chamber with a broken spine. Her cassette player was still plugged in by the armchair. The shawl she wore in my studio that day was folded on the back of it. I picked it up, held it to my face. It smelled like cedar and thyme. In the bedroom, her jewelry box sat open. Inside were plastic bangles, jade beads, a silver hairpin I had once tried on as a child. I didn't take anything. I didn't need to. What I came for was in the drawer beneath her bed. I pulled it open slowly and found the old box of tapes I hadn't taken with me. Dozens of them, unlabeled, dusty, some in cracked cases. I gathered them carefully into a cloth bag and sat cross-legged on the floor, just listening to the silence of the room. That's when I found it one tiny tape, marked only with a red dot. I hadn't seen it before. I slid it into my portable player and pressed play. At first, there was nothing. Then a small rustle. Then her voice, close to the mic, like she was whispering. Ah, Lynn, she said. This is for you. Only you. Don't show them unless you want to. Don't be scared to be the quiet one. Sometimes, quiet people are just waiting for the right sound. I closed my eyes. She continued. I know they don't see you. I know they see the bright ones, the loud ones, the ones who smile all the time. But you listen, you see, and I see you. The tape ended there. I stayed on the floor for a long time, just breathing, just remembering. Then I packed up the tapes and locked the door behind me. Later that month, Ava messaged me again. Want to collaborate? It wasn't a big idea, just a small thing. Her voice, my audio, one old song. We didn't tell anyone, we just made it. We released it on a quiet Sunday under a shared pseudonym, May's Girls. No one in the family noticed at first. But slowly, people found it. A few left comments in Chinese. One said, "This made me cry in my kitchen." Another wrote, "Reminds me of my mother's voice." We didn't respond. We didn't need to. We were speaking in Grandma's language now, and for the first time, it felt like someone was listening. By autumn, I'd moved into a new studio, small, second floor, windows that overlooked the back of a noodle shop. The rent was manageable. The ceiling leaked when it rained, but the acoustics were surprisingly warm. I set up my equipment one piece at a time, my condenser mic on the corner desk, my interface on the crate beside it, the foam panels that still smelled faintly of home. I didn't invite anyone to see it. Not yet. My work shifted, too. I wasn't just cleaning up other people's sound anymore. I was collecting something different now. Grandma's voice had done something to me, split something open. I started working on a long-form archive of immigrant lullabies, folk songs sung in bedrooms and kitchens and taxis. I reached out to elders in the community and recorded them in whatever language they were most comfortable in: Hokkien, Toisanese, Hakka, Tagalog, even snippets of Russian and Vietnamese. Some of them had forgotten whole verses. Some cried halfway through. Some hummed instead of singing. I took it all. I layered it. I let the cracks stay in. Ava came by one afternoon with ginger tea and 2 wrapped pastries. "It smells like dust and metal in here," she said, stepping around cables. "I'm working on that." I smiled, waving her toward the couch. She'd started doing local theater small productions, old musicals, community showcases. Her voice had changed. Softer in some places, more restrained. Not in a bad way, just different, like she'd started listening while she sang. I played her part of the archive. She sat in stillness through the whole 6-minute piece. When it ended, she blinked once, slowly. "That sounds like memory," she said. "Good," I replied. "That's what I wanted." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there, chewing pastry and drinking lukewarm tea, the track looping softly in the background. One day in November, I got a phone call from Aunt Lydia. It had been months since we last spoke. The last time she'd addressed me directly was at the burial, when she handed me a red envelope I never opened. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Rachel," she said, her voice thinner than I remembered. "Do you have a moment?" "Yes." Pause. "I've been thinking a lot about the wake," she began. "About the song. About what happened." I didn't say anything. "I owe you an apology," she continued. "I should have included you. I should have asked." Another pause. "It's not that I didn't think you had anything to contribute. When someone's always quiet, you forget to leave space for them. I didn't do it to make a point." I said. "I know," she replied. "That's what makes it worse. You did it out of love, and we didn't see you." I felt my throat tighten. "I listened to that recording again," she added. "It sounded like something sacred." I sat down at my desk. The sun was setting. My room was drenched in that late golden light that makes everything feel slightly suspended. "We're putting together a memory website for your grandmother," she said. "Photos, stories, recipes. I was wondering if you might want to contribute something." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." Uploading her voice felt like letting go again. I included 3 recordings, one of her singing, one of her telling a story about losing her shoe in a river, and one of her whispering the prayer she always mumbled before bed. I didn't clean them too much. I kept the hiss, the chair creak, the distant sound of a rice cooker finishing its cycle. I wanted people to know she was real. They added a photo of me to the contributors page. Just one. No title. No fanfare. But it was there. Thanksgiving was quiet that year. We didn't do a big family dinner. Ava and I made our own hot pot and store-bought dumplings, shared on the floor of my studio with paper bowls and too much chili oil. We played a cassette of Grandma singing along to old karaoke tracks. Ava sang harmony. I tapped the mic stand like it was a drum. We talked about Grandma's hands, how they were always moving, about her old garden, the way she buried eggshells to feed her tomatoes, about how she used to braid our hair differently, depending on how she thought we were feeling. She always knew when I was lying. Ava said, mouth full of fishball. Same. She used to hold my hand during temple prayers and squeeze it once if I wasn't bowing deep enough. She used to nudge me with her elbow when I hummed too loud. We laughed. Then we cried. Then we laughed again. It was the first time in years it felt like we were remembering the same person. Later that week, I walked into a local bookstore that had a listening station. They sometimes featured community artists. I'd submitted our song there months ago, not expecting much. When I put the headphones on, the track was already playing. It was Grandma's voice, over Ava's humming, with my mix of ambient sound beneath it: water, wind, streetcars, birds. A woman next to me turned and said, "Whoever made this is the kind of thing that stays with you." I didn't tell her it was mine. I just smiled and nodded. At the end of the year, Ava and I got invited to perform at a local Lunar New Year festival. We kept it simple. One mic, one track. She sang the lullaby. I played the field recording of Grandma's voice over a live loop. We didn't introduce ourselves. We didn't say what it was. But halfway through the set, a child in the front row started singing along in perfect Mandarin. Ava caught my eye and smiled. Afterward, an old man came up to us with tears in his eyes. My wife used to sing that to our daughters. He said, "I haven't heard it in 40 years. He held my hand for a long time. You made something holy." I didn't have words, just breath, just the echo of Grandma's song still hanging in the rafters. In the early weeks of January, the sky never really turned blue, just layers of pale gray, always damp, like someone left the clouds soaking in dishwater. I spent most of my days in the studio, editing half-finished tracks, layering ambient textures behind ancient voices. But every once in a while, I found myself opening the file called Mei Lin, Archive Master. It wasn't meant to be public. Not yet. It was for me, a living folder where I stitched the unseen parts of Grandma together. There were little things: her humming as she folded towels, her muttering while peeling oranges, her laughter when she mispronounced the name of a game show host. I'd slice them all into neat segments, with gentle fades in and out, wrapped like gifts in digital silence. I didn't know what I was making. A portrait, a diary, a shrine. Maybe all of them. Ava texted me a photo one evening, a handwritten recipe in Grandma's shaky script for salted turnip rice. The edges were tea-stained and torn. Beneath it, Ava had typed, "I found this in one of her sewing books." "Want to try it this weekend?" I replied. Yes. We cooked in my tiny studio kitchen, which was really just a hot plate and a sink. Ava did the chopping. I handled the timing. Grandma always said rice was like memory: you couldn't rush it or it would come out broken. The smell filled the space like childhood. We ate sitting on milk crates, legs tucked under us like kids again. "I used to think she loved you more," Ava said suddenly. I looked up. "When we were little," she clarified. You got to spend the summers with her. You got the cassette player. She let you sleep in her room. You were always the favorite, I said. She laughed, but there was something watery in it. I think we were both wrong. We sat in silence for a while, letting the rice settle. She loved us in different languages, I said. Ava nodded. I wish I'd listened more, she whispered. The next time I saw Aunt Lydia was at the community center's remembrance wall. They had set up a space where people could pin notes, photos, even audio snippets to honor relatives they had lost that year. I'd submitted a short audio loop Grandma saying, "Have you eaten yet 3 different ways?" layered with the click of her chopsticks and the scrape of her chair against the linoleum floor. It played on a loop from a small speaker beneath a photo of her holding a dumpling aloft like a prize. I didn't expect anyone to be there when I visited, but Aunt Lydia was standing in front of it, arms crossed, eyes red. She turned when she heard me. I came to clean up her apartment last week, she said. Your mother asked me to sort through the boxes. I nodded. There was a folder in one drawer. She continued. Letters you wrote her. Tapes you sent when you were in college. She kept everything. I didn't know what to say. She recorded herself reading your essays, Aunt Lydia added. Practicing English. Did you know that I shook my head? My throat was thick. She was proud, she said softly. I just didn't know how to see it. I looked up at the wall. My grandmother's voice spilled gently into the room. Chifan Lemeyu over and over again. A question, a song, a memory. I think she made room for all of us, I said. Aunt Lydia placed a photo of Grandma holding a baby me. I realized on the pinboard. It slipped once, then held. I'm glad you recorded her, she said, before turning to go. It makes her feel close again. By spring, the archive had grown into something bigger than I'd planned. People started reaching out. A Vietnamese grandmother in San Jose sent me a clip of her singing a lullaby to her grandson. A Nigerian man in Oakland shared a voice note of his mother reciting stories from their village. Someone mailed me a USB stick with no name, just a recording of a woman crying while folding laundry, whispering apologies in Spanish. I didn't curate them. I didn't fix them. I just listened. And then I did what Grandma taught me to do. I held them, with sound. I layered them into one long, continuous piece over 25 voices, breathing in and out of each other like wind through branches. Some sang, some wept, some just spoke their names into the dark. I named it Mothers Who Never Left. Ava helped me organize a small listening event. We didn't book a venue. We used the old temple where Grandma used to volunteer. We lit incense. We passed out tea. People came. Not a huge crowd. Just enough to fill the space. We sat on the floor. The track played once, uninterrupted. And when it ended, no one clapped. They just stayed seated, eyes closed, breathing. It felt like prayer. After everyone left, I stayed behind. The room smelled like sandalwood and warm wood polish. Ava was folding up chairs. I was rolling up cables. You know, she said, I used to think this would be your backup plan. What all this? Audio. Mixing. I thought you were just doing it while figuring out what you really wanted. And now? She looked at me. I think this was the thing. I smiled. Grandma knew. She added. Before we did. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Later that night, I played the original track again. The first one I ever made from Grandma's voicemail. It started with silence, then her soft voice. I had a funny dream. The same dream I now believed she'd had more than once. I closed my eyes. Let her speak. Let her guide me back to the riverbank, where she sang, where I recorded, where memory didn't need proof, only presence. Summer came all at once that year. No warning. One day it was mist and sweaters. The next, it was sunlight bouncing off car hoods, and the city smelling like melted asphalt and dried jasmine. I had the windows open in the studio, even though it made the recordings riskier. I liked the sounds that drifted in kids playing, distant music from a fruit truck, wind pushing against wind chimes someone had nailed to a fire escape. I was working on a new piece. No vocals this time, just the ambient moments people forget to capture, bowls being stacked, water boiling, the thump of bare feet on linoleum. I called it evidence of living. One night, as I was cutting together a rhythm made entirely from the sound of drawer handles and teacups, I got a voicemail from my mom. She rarely called. When I played it back, there was static. Then her voice, uncertain. Rachel. I cleaned out the last of the apartment. There was a box labeled for Ah Lin. Your name. In Chinese. I sat upright. I left it in front of your door. Didn't want to disturb you. I paused the session and walked out immediately. Sure enough, a small cardboard box was waiting on the mat, neatly taped, labeled in Grandma's writing with a black marker. The characters were faint and trembling. I carried it inside like it might break. Inside were cassette tapes. Of course, 6 of them, marked with numbers, wrapped in a red silk scarf I recognized from a wedding photo. But there was something else too. A letter, written in Mandarin on lined yellow paper, folded in fourths. My Mandarin reading wasn't great. I took out my phone and started translating it piece by piece. It said, Ah Lin. If you are reading this, then I am gone. That is how life goes. These tapes are only for you. Do not share them unless you want to. They are pieces of me I couldn't say out loud. Not all songs are sung with mouths. Some must be assembled by the ones who know where to look. You always knew how to listen with your hands. Finish what I couldn't. Tell the truth in sound. I love you. Grandma. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, the scarf in my lap, my fingers pressing it flat. I could still smell her perfume, that rosewater powder scent I never found anywhere else. I loaded the first tape into the player. A click, then static, then her voice, clear as sunlight through blinds. This is the story of my sister. Her name was Mei Ling. She spoke slowly, as if worried no one would believe her. We were born 6 years apart. I was the older. She was the braver. During the famine, she stole rice from a merchant's cart and gave it to me. I was too scared. She said, "Don't live like a ghost while you're still breathing." I stopped the tape. There were 5 more, each one a story I'd never heard about the war, about a lost child, about crossing oceans and burying memories beneath new names. She'd told no one else. I knew because there was a line in tape 3 where she said, "I never told Lydia this." She was too young. And Ava, she belongs to another kind of world. I listened to all 6 that night. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the studio, curled in a blanket, headphones on, like I was holding her heartbeat in my hands. The next morning, I called Ava. "I need your voice." I said. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Okay." When? We worked for weeks. I built the foundation sound textures, old recordings, interwoven fragments of Grandma's original tapes. Ava read the translations aloud, with long pauses, like breath between memory. She didn't perform them. She let them sit in her mouth like offerings. We called it Mei and Mei Ling, a twin portrait of the sister Grandma had loved and the life she had buried. We didn't show the family, not right away. We released it quietly, a limited press of cassettes. No digital version, just tape, just analog, just the way Grandma would have liked it. They sold out in 3 days. Someone left a comment on the order form. This made me cry in Cantonese. Another. It felt like hearing my mother's soul without her body. We mailed each order by hand. Ava stamped the envelopes. I tucked in a sprig of dried jasmine. We didn't tell anyone it was about Grandma until after the last one shipped. Then we played it once at the community garden where she used to volunteer. Just us. Just the family. Chairs in a circle. A cassette player on a folding table. Ava holding the mic. Me kneeling by the mixer. They listened. Uncle Greg cried. Aunt Lydia pressed a handkerchief to her lips. My mom didn't say anything, but when it ended, she came over and touched my arm. Just once. She told you everything. She whispered. I nodded. She trusted you. She trusted all of us. I said. She just gave me the key. Later, as people began to leave, Ava and I stayed back to clean up. You know, she said, wrapping the mic cord slowly. If we had heard this 10 years ago, we wouldn't have understood it. I looked around the garden. The roses were in bloom. A bee landed on the edge of a chair. We weren't listening then, I said. But she was, Ava replied. To all of us. I looked up at the sky open, pale, endless. I imagined Grandma somewhere in it, not looking down, just listening, waiting for us to hum something true. By mid-August, the jasmine had dried on the vines outside the studio. The petals browned and curled inward like tiny fists. I left them there. I liked the way they clung on even after the bloom was gone. The cassette project shifted things. Ava and I started getting invitations, small panels, community listening rooms, one university lecture where we sat in front of a dozen sleepy students and spoke about sonic memory like we were experts. I didn't mind. We weren't trying to be famous, just honest. That week, I was invited to curate a segment for a local museum exhibit titled Daughters of Echoes. The theme was multi-generational sound. They gave me a 10-minute slot, 10 minutes to hold someone's attention. I chose fragments Grandma's voice describing the day her sister was taken. Ava singing half a folk lullaby with no clear ending, the sound of soup boiling, a field recording of Grandma tapping her fingers against her porcelain teacup in rhythm. Then, at the very end, I layered the voicemail that started it all. Ah, Lynn. I had a funny dream. I didn't add music. I didn't clean the static. I left her breath right where it fell. The exhibit opened on a Thursday. Ava came with me. She wore a loose linen dress and no makeup. I carried a tape recorder in my bag. Not because I needed it, but because it felt wrong to show up empty-handed. The room was small, just 3 benches and 4 mounted speakers arranged in a circle. Each one pulsed with breath, voice, memory. A stranger sat with their eyes closed, head tilted back. When it ended, they stood up, wiped their eyes, and left without saying a word. That was enough. We didn't stay long. Outside, the air smelled like rain on cement. Ava linked her arm through mine. You still feel invisible? She asked, nudging me with her elbow. Sometimes, I admitted, but not right now. I looked up at the clouds, the lights from passing cars bouncing off the street like underwater reflections. No, I said, not right now. One evening, a small brown envelope arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note in delicate cursive. Dear Rachel, I am Mei Ling's daughter. Someone played your cassette for me. I recognized my mother's voice in your grandmother's. I thought she was gone forever. Thank you. I hope we meet someday. There was no phone number, no name. I read it twice, then placed it inside the wooden box where I kept Grandma's red scarf. A week later, I got another message this time, an email from a young woman in Toronto. She was working on a documentary about intergenerational grief among Asian women and wanted to know if she could interview me. I almost said no, I didn't like talking about it in a straight line, but I thought about the envelope, about the people who had written to say they heard their own mothers in mine, about the ones who still hadn't spoken. So I said yes. The call was short, 40 minutes. I spoke in a low voice. She asked thoughtful questions. Then near the end, she said, "What do you think your grandmother wanted most?" I paused. I didn't know how to answer that. Not fully. But I thought about it for a long time. After the interview ended, after I shut the laptop, I sat in the studio with the lights off, just listening to the hum of my hard drive and the far-off rumble of a train. What had Grandma wanted? Not applause, not recognition. She wanted to be remembered as whole, not just a grandmother, not just a widow or a seamstress or a woman with a neat kitchen and quiet sighs. She wanted to be remembered as someone who survived, who sang, who broke rules and kept secrets and made rice and saved voices inside her sleeves. She wanted someone to carry her. I could do that. At the end of the summer, we held one last event. Not a concert, not an exhibit, just an open mic night in the basement of the Chinese Cultural Center. Chairs in a loose circle, one mic, no amplification, no stage. We called it the After Echo. Anyone could come, anyone could share. Ava read one of Grandma's recipes aloud like a poem. A teenage boy played a recording of his great-aunt rapping in Cantonese. A woman stood and sang the lullaby her mother hummed while washing her hair in a bucket. At the very end, I played a field recording of rain hitting a tin roof, layered under Grandma humming. The room went silent. Then someone in the back whispered, "Again." So I played it again. Afterwards, people hugged, or didn't. Some just left flowers on the table. One woman left behind a tiny cassette, unlabeled, wrapped in tissue paper. I still haven't played it. Maybe I never will. Maybe some things don't need to be heard to be held. That night, Ava and I stayed late, sweeping the floor, folding chairs. "You think they would have seen us like this?" she asked. "Grandma, our parents, the family. Do you think they would have recognized what this was?" I thought for a while. "I don't think it matters." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because we didn't do it to be seen." She nodded. We finished in silence. Before we left, I turned off the overhead lights and stood in the dark for a moment. Let the echo settle. Let the ghosts rest. Let the silence hold what words couldn't. The first fall without her came quietly. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just the days growing shorter, the light changing color, the markets replacing mangoes with pomelos. I found myself listening to the same 30-second clip of Grandma saying my name while I folded laundry or stirred soup. Sometimes, I whispered it back. Not because I thought she could hear me, but because I needed to remind myself I was still the person she had seen. Ava moved into a new apartment closer to the water. We didn't see each other as often, but when we did, it was easy. She brought over a handheld mic one night and said, "Let's record something. Just for us." We didn't plan it. We just pressed record and started talking. About memories, about food, about the things Grandma never told us, and the things she did. We told stories we had forgotten we remembered. We laughed until we cried. At one point, Ava said she would have told us to get more sleep and stop being so dramatic. And we both burst out laughing, even as our eyes burned. I saved the file under the name Sisters, kind of. One morning, I woke up to a letter in the mail, real mail, thick cream-colored paper. It was from the local library board. They were putting together a permanent digital archive titled San Francisco Voices Family, Faith, and Firsts. They wanted to include Grandma's recordings. At first, I hesitated. It felt final, like placing something behind glass, like saying, "This is done." But it wasn't done. Not really. Still, I said yes. We prepared a small selection, her telling the river story, her humming the lullaby, and a voice note of her asking me if I remembered to eat. We added a note that said, "Preserved by her granddaughter, Rachel Lynn." When it launched, I sat at the library terminal and listened through headphones that smelled faintly of plastic and old books. Across from me, a teenager tapped away at their laptop. A baby cried in the children's corner. I closed my eyes and heard Grandma's voice echo into the fabric of a place that had always felt too quiet for someone like her. Now, she lived there too. Not long after, I visited her grave alone. I hadn't been back since the burial. It was early. The sky was pink, the kind that looks like memory feels blurred edges, soft light, nothing sharp. I brought the cassette player. I played the tape we made May and Mei Ling and placed it gently beside the headstone. I watched the trees sway. I whispered a thank you I never got to say. Then I said something I hadn't said aloud in years. "I'm okay now." I wasn't sure if it was true, but it felt close. That night, I opened the archive one last time. All the files, all the names, all the dates. I scrolled through them slowly, letting each one register in my body like a heartbeat. Then I created a new folder. I called it Not the End, and I started a new track. No words, no stories, just sound, the clatter of chopsticks, wind over the hills of Sunset District. My mother sighing while tying her apron, Ava laughing in the distance, Grandma breathing into a microphone without realizing it was on. I layered them all together, a kind of symphony of the unremarkable. And I listened. Later that week, I got another letter. This one from Ava. A card. Really. On the front, a photo of the two of us at ages 4 and 5, both in matching floral dresses. Grandma's hands on our shoulders. She must have slipped it into Ava's things years ago. Inside, Ava had written, "We never got a proper picture with just the three of us, but this is close. She gave us everything we didn't know how to hold. Now we do." I pinned the card above my desk. Autumn deepened. I started teaching a free workshop at the Cultural Center, Audio as Ancestry. Most of the attendees were older women. A few brought their daughters. One brought her grandson. We didn't do anything fancy. I showed them how to record, how to hold a mic gently, how to listen to the creak in someone's voice, and understand that it's not a flaw, it's a scar. And scars are maps. One woman cried when she heard her own voice played back. She said it reminded her of her mother. I told her that happens sometimes. Another recorded a voicemail for her daughter and asked if I could save it somewhere safe. I told her I would. I still see Ava, not as often, but always meaningfully. We meet in old places, noodle shops, libraries, empty concert halls. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. She's working on a solo project now. I'm mastering the audio. We don't fight anymore about who was seen. We both were. Eventually, in the ways that mattered. A few weeks ago, I got a text from my mother. "What was the name of that song you and your grandmother always played? The river one?" I stared at the message for a while before replying. "It's called Moonlight Over Riverbank." "Want me to send it to you?" She replied almost instantly, "Yes, please." So I did. And for a long time after, nothing. Then finally, it made me cry. I miss her. I miss you too. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. Last night, I played the original track again, the voicemail. The lullaby. The piano under her voice. The one they heard at the wake. The one that changed everything. It still hurt. But not in the same way. It felt more like a hand pressing gently against my back. Like she was behind me. Not pushing. just there, present, whole. If you're reading this, if you've ever stood in the shadows of your own family, forgotten or unheard, I want you to know something. You're not invisible. Your voice matters even if it's quiet, even if it lives in wires and waveforms and half-finished songs. You are someone's memory waiting to echo. So record it. Say the thing. Sing the song, even if no one listens right away. One day, they will. And when they do, the silence will shift, just like it did for me, just like it did for her.